Hello AmericansChannel. This video is made by free videos from Storyblocks, and these images and video we use just for explanation, and it's free use also.
Landlord stumbles upon squatter, turns pale when he realizes who it is. When the landlord bought the house, he couldn't believe how cheap it was. Fixing it up and renting it out seemed like an easy plan for quick wealth. But when things seem too good to be true, they often are. This house had a squatter, and its identity was beyond anything the landlord expected. James spotted an incredible deal, an old two-story house for half the usual price. It seemed unbelievable, but he quickly made an offer. A bargain like this couldn't be ignored. The house needed work, but James prided himself on recognizing value. Still, the price felt too good to be true, leaving him slightly wary. The Petersons, the previous owners, seemed almost desperate to sell. They didn't haggle and appeared relieved to finalize the deal. "We're happy to see it go," Mrs. Peterson said nervously. Mr. Peterson nodded, his gaze shifting uneasily toward the house. Their eagerness unsettled James, though he dismissed his doubts, focused on the opportunity. As they walked James through the house, the Petersons revealed their reason for selling: unexplained noises at night. Mr. Peterson described creaks and phantom footsteps, which only worsened over time. James listened politely but dismissed their concerns as overactive imagination. He figured it was nothing more than normal old house quirks or small animals. James wasn't deterred by the Petersons' spooky stories. "Old houses always have quirks," he said confidently. "Loose floorboards or nesting animals seem more plausible explanations. A house of this size, at such a low price, was worth the risk." With minimal hesitation, he finalized the deal, feeling satisfied with his purchase despite the peculiar warning. After signing the paperwork, James was eager to begin transforming the house. He imagined its potential and looked forward to tackling renovations. Standing in the empty living room, he saw endless possibilities. While the house needed work, James was experienced with such projects. He felt confident it would be worth every penny in the end. James wanted to start renovations immediately. His first goal was to make a bedroom livable, allowing him to stay on site and save time. With the rest of the house in disrepair, he focused on one space. Preparing this room would feel like progress and serve as a practical base for his renovation efforts. James chose a small bedroom at the back of the house to begin his work. It required minimal effort: cleaning, minor repairs, and fresh paint. He spent the entire day scrubbing walls, patching cracks, and clearing cobwebs. As the sun set, the room was ready. Though modest, it was a satisfying accomplishment for the first day. James carried a mattress inside, setting up a simple sleeping arrangement with sheets, a pillow, and blankets. The room wasn't perfect, but it was functional enough. Exhausted from the day's work, James was content with his progress. Though it still needed work, this small space felt like the start of something significant. Standing in the bedroom, James felt proud of his progress. The house was far from its potential, but this room represented a small victory. He mentally planned the next steps, excited by the challenges ahead. The old house needed new life, and James was eager to bring it to fruition, one project at a time. As James settled into bed, the house was eerily quiet. He chalked it up to being in a new place, far from the city. Sleep came quickly, but a sudden noise woke him. At first, he thought it was the wind, but then he heard it again, a distinct creaking sound from the hallway. James lay still, listening intently. The creaking came again, louder this time, followed by faint footsteps. His mind raced. Was it an animal or something worse? Remembering the Petersons' warnings, James decided not to let his imagination take over. Determined to figure it out, he grabbed his flashlight and headed to investigate. James quietly opened his bedroom door and stepped into the hallway, lit only by moonlight. The creaking persisted, but everything appeared normal. As he moved cautiously through the house, his footsteps echoed the same eerie sound. James checked room after room, his pulse quickening with every step. He searched the living room, kitchen, and even the basement door, but found nothing unusual. Still, the uneasy feeling in his chest wouldn't fade. Returning to bed, James tried to dismiss the noises as the house settling, but he couldn't have been more wrong. Something was in the house with him. Back in bed, James tried to calm down, convincing himself his tired mind was overreacting. But just as he adjusted his blankets, he heard a low, rapid tapping sound above him. It came from the attic, as though something was moving there. James froze, paralyzed by fear. James didn't recall seeing much in the attic earlier, but the sound was unmistakable. Trying to rationalize, he guessed it could be a raccoon. Still, unease gripped him. Sweating, he chose not to investigate again. Instead, he pulled the blankets over his head, forcing himself to sleep despite the fear. By some miracle, James managed to sleep a little. He woke to sunlight streaming through the windows, the house quiet again. With the light of day, the eerie events of the night seemed distant. James hoped it had been a one-time occurrence, unaware that the strange happenings were only beginning. James shuffled to the kitchen, hungry and groggy, reaching for the cereal box he'd left on the counter. He found it gone. Confused, he checked the cupboards but couldn't find it. A can of beans was also missing. A strange unease settled over him as he wondered what was happening. As James searched further, he noticed other missing items. His hammer, used just the day before, was gone. The bucket he'd filled with debris had vanished, too. He tried to convince himself he had misplaced them, but the growing list of missing items made him feel uneasy, as if something wasn't right. James spent an hour searching every corner of the house. He even braved the creaky attic ladder, but the missing items were nowhere to be found. This sense of unease deepened. How could tools and food simply vanish? The house, once full of potential, now felt ominous, as though hiding secrets. James tried to calm himself. "Old houses are strange," he muttered, staring at his mattress on the floor. Sunlight streaming through the windows made everything seem normal again. Yet, the thought of spending another night there sent shivers down his spine, making him question whether he'd made the right decision. James resolved not to stay at the house overnight again. The hour-long commute to his home was a small price to pay for peace of mind. Treating the house as a project and leaving by sunset seemed like the only way to manage his growing dread of the eerie nights. Each morning, James drove to the house, tackling renovations with determination. He scrubbed floors, painted walls, and replaced fixtures. By evening, he packed his tools and left. Back at his quiet home, he found solace in restful nights, far removed from the unsettling events of the house after dark. During the day, the house felt ordinary, bathed in sunlight. James focused on this reality, convincing himself it was fine. The absence of strange noises during daylight hours was reassuring. By leaving before nightfall, he could maintain the illusion that the house's problems were behind him, at least for now. Weeks turned into months, and James made steady progress. Fresh paint, sturdy stairs, and a renovated kitchen transformed the house into a dream home. Despite lingering unease, James felt proud of his work. During the day, the house seemed like a success, helping him push aside memories of its eerie nights. James kept his strict routine, work hard during the day and leave before dark. The long commute became routine, and the house began to take shape. The safety of his quiet home gave him the energy to keep going, ensuring the house's transformation without confronting its unsettling nighttime secrets. After 6 months, the renovations were complete. James admired the polished floors and modern finishes, proud of his efforts. Yet, a faint unease lingered, as if the house retained some hidden truths. Determined not to dwell on the past, he focused on getting the house ready for the market. The house's fresh coat of paint and inviting interiors attracted interest immediately. James highlighted the best features in the online listing, and inquiries flooded in. While it looked perfect on the outside, James couldn't shake the feeling that its polished appearance masked something darker. Still, he needed to move forward. As James crafted the house's description, guilt crept in. He omitted the strange events and painted it as a dream home. With so much money and effort invested, he couldn't risk scaring off buyers. "It's just an old house," he muttered, pushing down his doubts to focus on finalizing the sale. Sam and Emily, a young couple, were eager to rent the house. Their enthusiasm made James hopeful the property would finally be someone else's concern. Showing them around, he highlighted the house's natural light, renovated features, and peaceful location, doing his best to mask his lingering unease about its past. During the tour, Sam asked, "Is there anything we should know about the house? Any quirks?" James hesitated but quickly smiled. "Nothing unusual," he lied. "What you see is what you get, a charming, updated home." Though his words felt heavy, the couple seemed satisfied, their excitement masking any doubts James carried. As they toured the house, Emily admired the craftsmanship. "You've done a wonderful job," she said, running her hand along the banister. James thanked her, grateful but cautious. He avoided lengthy conversations, worried they might uncover what he was trying to hide. He focused on getting through the meeting and securing the lease. In the kitchen, Sam asked about the neighborhood. "It's peaceful, right?" "That's what we're looking for." James nodded quickly. "Very quiet, no traffic, friendly neighbors, lots of privacy." His words felt hollow as memories of his sleepless nights surfaced. Still, he maintained his reassuring tone, hoping the couple wouldn't notice his unease. James handed them the lease agreement as Emily skimmed through it. Sam asked, "Did the last owners live here long?" James hesitated but replied smoothly, "A while, but they downsized. It's a big house for 2 people." He avoided mentioning their abrupt sale or their cryptic warnings, determined to push the deal through. As the couple signed the lease, James felt relief mixed with anxiety. He hoped the house's strange history had ended with the renovations. "If you need anything, just call," he said, handing them the keys. They smiled, their excitement palpable. James forced a smile back, suppressing the growing weight of doubt inside him. Watching the couple drive away, James lingered in the yard, staring at the house. Its flawless exterior hid the unsettling memories he couldn't forget. "They'll be fine," he muttered, convincing himself. Yet, as he walked to his car, unease gnawed at him. Had he truly done the right thing by renting it out? Driving home, James replayed the day in his mind. Flipping the house was his plan all along, yet doubts haunted him. What if the eerie nights weren't over? The Petersons had dealt with the house's secrets for years. It felt naive to believe they had vanished with a fresh coat of paint. James stared at the calendar, the moving date marked clearly. He hoped the couple's first night had been uneventful. The thought of receiving a call filled him with dread. His nerves eased slightly as he reminded himself if the phone stayed silent, everything was fine. He clung to this fragile hope. The phone rang at 6 a.m., shattering the silence. James jolted awake, his pulse racing. Early calls were never good. Dread consumed him as he picked up, already suspecting the reason. His hands shook as he answered. "Hello?" he said, bracing for what was coming. He already knew it wouldn't be good news. "James," Sam's voice trembled, with Emily sobbing in the background. "We need you to come over," Sam said, panic clear in his tone. James's stomach dropped. "What's going on?" he asked, fearing the worst. Sam's reply was shaky. "The house, it's different at night. Noises, strange things are happening. We're scared." James listened as Sam described the events. "We heard banging all night," Sam said. "The kitchen was trash, food spilled everywhere." James closed his eyes, steadying his breath. His fear was confirmed. Whatever haunted the house hadn't gone. Struggling to remain calm, he tried to find the right words to reassure the terrified couple. "There's more," Sam added. "The back door was open, though we locked it. There were muddy footprints in the pantry." James felt his chest tighten as Emily's sobs grew louder in the background. The weight of his guilt bore down on him. He had known something was wrong, but had stayed silent. James forced himself to speak. "Okay, I'll come over," he said, keeping his voice steady despite his nerves. Sam sounded relieved, but James's mind raced. How could he admit he'd known the house was strange? Shaking his head, he grabbed his keys and headed out, determined to face whatever awaited him. The drive felt endless as memories of his nights in the house replayed vividly. The creaks, the missing items, and the unease came rushing back. James had convinced himself renovations would help. Clearly, he was wrong. Gripping the steering wheel tightly, he dreaded explaining this to Sam and Emily. When James arrived, sunlight bathed the house, masking its eerie nature. Sam opened the door, pale and shaken. "Thanks for coming," he said, his voice trembling. James stepped inside, finding the kitchen in disarray, food scattered, cupboards open. Muddy footprints marked the floor, adding to the growing sense of dread. Emily sat on the couch, clutching a blanket. Her tearful eyes met James's. "What's wrong with this place?" she asked, her voice breaking. James hesitated before replying. Old houses can be strange. They settle, make noises. His explanation felt hollow, even to him, as he avoided meeting her gaze. "This isn't just noises," Sam said firmly. James nodded, guilt weighing him down. "I'll help figure it out," he promised. Though fear gnawed at him, James couldn't walk away now. The house's secrets had followed him to Sam and Emily, and he resolved to stay until they found answers. James agreed to stay the night with them. He'd sleep in the spare bedroom to face whatever haunted the house together. As they prepared the room, James felt a heavy dread. He couldn't avoid the truth any longer. Whatever was happening here, he would confront it no matter the cost. The day passed uneventfully. Under the sunlight, the house seemed calm and harmless. Determined to prepare, the trio went to the hardware store, buying cameras and motion detectors. James hoped these tools would reveal the truth. But as night approached, the house's stillness grew unnerving, amplifying their shared tension. They set up cameras in every room, double-checking each one to ensure nothing would go unseen. James worked methodically, trying to ease the couple's nerves. "We're ready," he said when the last camera was in place. But as darkness fell, the house felt heavy, as though it were bracing for something. Sam and Emily struggled to sleep, their nerves on edge. James stayed awake, monitoring the cameras in the spare bedroom. The glow of the screen lit his face as he waited. Hours passed, the house silent and still. James grew tense, knowing it was only a matter of time before something happened. At 2 a.m., it began. A faint tapping echoed, apping louder thuds. James's heart pounded as he scanned the camera feeds. When he reached the kitchen view, he froze. A shadowy figure crouched, moving deliberately, opening cabinets. His breath caught. Something or someone was in the house with them. James leaned closer, his eyes fixed on the screen. The figure's movements were fluid, almost human. Then he saw a hand reaching into a cabinet. This wasn't an animal. It was a person. Fear washed over him as the realization hit there was an intruder inside the house. Adrenaline surged as James grabbed his flashlight, gripping it tightly. He didn't turn it on, determined to stay unnoticed. Quietly, he stepped into the hallway, every floorboard creak amplifying his anxiety. The flashlight would be his weapon. He moved carefully, determined to confront whoever was in his house. Pausing at the top of the stairs, James listened. The rustling in the kitchen continued, metal clinking faintly. Should he wake Sam and Emily or confront the intruder alone? The sound was getting closer. His instincts pushed him forward. There was no time to think. He tightened his grip and moved toward the stairs. James descended the staircase, his breathing shallow as he approached the source of the noise. The flashlight felt heavy in his hand, but he steadied himself. Each step brought him closer to the kitchen and the unknown figure. The house felt tense, every shadow adding to the sense of unease. Moonlight faintly illuminated the staircase, guiding James's slow descent. The sounds grew louder as he neared the bottom. He flexed his arm, ready to act. Fear and determination battled inside him, but he knew there was no turning back. He reached the midpoint, heart racing, ready for what lay ahead. As James reached the bottom, he stepped on a screwdriver left from earlier. It rolled beneath him and he lost his balance, crashing to the floor. The loud bang echoed through the quiet house. Pain shot through his back, but adrenaline propelled him upward. The intruder had heard him now. James scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding. The noise in the kitchen had stopped abruptly. He sprinted toward the room, hoping to catch the figure. His adrenaline was high as he charged forward, knowing he had to act quickly before the intruder disappeared into the shadows. Bursting into the kitchen, James spotted a shadow darting toward the hallway. Without hesitation, he chased after them, his flashlight shaking with each step. "I've got you now," he shouted, his voice echoing through the house. Determined to corner the intruder, he pushed forward, the house feeling colder with every step. The hallway led to small rooms with no other exits. James was sure he had trapped the figure. He carefully searched each space, checking every possible hiding spot, but each room turned up empty. There was no sign of the person he had chased. It felt as though they had vanished, leaving James confused and frustrated. James stood in the final room, breathing heavily as his flashlight trembled in his grip. How could the intruder disappear so quickly? He retraced his steps, searching every corner again, but it was futile. The figure was gone. "You're not as clever as you think," he muttered. Yet, the eerie stillness of the hallway unnerved him as he walked away. Returning to the kitchen, James surveyed the mess, open cabinets, spilled food, and an overwhelming sense of someone's lingering presence. He felt defeated, unable to make sense of the situation. He returned to the spare bedroom, his failure weighing on him. The frustration and confusion gnawed at him, but he resolved to continue searching for answers. James slumped at the desk, staring at the camera monitor. The house was completely still, with no movement visible. He clenched his fists, his frustration mounting. "You're hiding again," he said quietly, his voice edged with anger. The silence of the house felt like a cruel mockery, taunting his inability to catch the intruder. As the hours dragged on, exhaustion crept in. James rubbed his tired eyes, the glare from the monitor making them sting. The adrenaline that had sustained him was fading. "You win this round," he muttered, leaning back. He didn't want to stop, but he knew he needed rest to continue the fight another day. With a sigh, James powered down the monitor and lay on the makeshift bed. The room felt colder, his thoughts replaying the night's events in an endless loop. "Tomorrow," he whispered, gripping the blanket tightly. "We'll figure it out." The uncertainty lingered, but he allowed himself to rest, preparing for what the next day might bring. Sleep didn't come easily, but James knew he couldn't let his frustration consume him. Tomorrow would bring a fresh start, another chance to find answers. As silence enveloped the house, James forced himself to relax. Despite the night's failures, he was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how long it took or what it demanded. By morning, James gathered with Sam and Emily to discuss the night's events. They listened as he recounted his chase, their disappointment evident. James decided that chasing shadows wasn't enough. "We need to figure out where this person is hiding," he said firmly. It was time to think strategically and uncover the intruder's hideout. The group agreed to contact the previous owners for more insight. James made the call, explaining the strange happenings. The elderly couple sounded distressed. "We had hoped the house's troubles would end with us," Mrs. Peterson admitted, her voice tinged with regret. Their concern was genuine, but what they revealed next left James even more perplexed. "We weren't the original owners," Mr. Peterson revealed, catching James by surprise. They explained the house was built by another man who sold it under peculiar circumstances. The Petersons had only interacted with a realtor, as the original owner refused to meet them. tension surrounding the sale had marked the house from the beginning, hinting at deeper secrets. James pushed for details, and the Petersons admitted the realtor's evasive behavior had felt suspicious. It seemed like something wasn't being said, Mrs. Peterson confessed, but they hadn't investigated further and now regretted it. James couldn't shake their words, which added weight to the mystery and raised even more unsettling questions. When James asked about the house's past, Mr. Peterson suggested City Hall. They'll have original records, he said. The idea gave James hope this was a chance to uncover the truth. He felt the mystery closing in, but knew this step could finally provide the answers they needed to explain the house's strange occurrences. James shared the idea with Sam and Emily, who quickly agreed. It makes sense, Sam said. Emily nodded, her worry still evident. The group realized the search at City Hall might only be the beginning. Little did they know that what they were about to uncover would be a groundbreaking revelation in the case. The trio gathered supplies, ensuring nothing was forgotten. James grabbed his notebook, filled with the Petersons' notes, and steeled himself for what lay ahead. Let's find some answers, he said, his voice firm but tinged with unease. Locking the house behind them, the weight of its secrets pressed on them as they headed to the car. In the bright daylight, the house's haunting presence felt subdued. Maybe we'll figure out who's been sneaking in, Emily said, her voice uncertain. The quiet ride ahead promised time to process their thoughts. James watched Sam toss their last bags in the car, the team united in their determination to confront the mystery head-on. We'll figure this out, James said, trying to reassure everyone, including himself. The house receded in the distance as they began their journey to City Hall. Though the drive was short, James felt the house's silent pull, as though it was waiting for their return. Shaking off the unease, he focused on the road ahead. Let's get to work, James said as they entered City Hall. The grand Victorian-style building gave the trio a sense of purpose. The clerk guided them to the archives where the old property records were kept. The atmosphere inside was hushed, and the trio braced themselves for whatever answers they might find among the papers. James sifted through documents, his eyes catching the name Ernest Wilhelm on the original deed. This has to be him, the first owner, he said. The date read 1960. He'd be 84 now, Sam calculated, his voice tinged with disbelief. The idea of an elderly man sneaking through the house left them stunned. Emily shook her head. Could he really be sneaking around at that age? James didn't answer, engrossed in the papers. Then he froze. Look at this, he said, pulling out a blueprint. His face turned serious. This isn't on the current plans. Sam and Emily leaned in, realizing the blueprint revealed something shocking. The older blueprint showed a large hidden space beneath the house with an entrance from the pantry. James's renovation plans and the lease agreement showed no such feature. This explains everything, Sam said, pointing to the secret area. Emily paled, realizing this hidden space had allowed someone to move freely in the house. He never left, Emily whispered, her voice shaky. The group exchanged looks of disbelief. James closed the file, his hands trembling. That's how he's been staying hidden, he said. The weight of realization settled over them. They knew there was only one thing left to do: return to the house and confront the truth. James quickly returned the file and faced the others. We need to go back and check this out, he said. Sam and Emily nodded, their fear giving way to determination. They hurried out of City Hall. If we find that entrance, we'll have our answers, James added, clutching his notebook as they stepped into the sunlight. The drive back was silent, the tension heavy. Sam stared out the window, jaw clenched. Emily nervously fidgeted in the back seat. What if he's dangerous, she asked. James tightened his grip on the wheel. We'll be careful, he said, though he felt his own nerves rising. As the house came into view, the tension only grew. We're here, James said as they approached the driveway. The house appeared calm, its exterior betraying none of the mystery inside. They sat quietly for a moment before James broke the silence. We'll head straight to the pantry. No hesitations. Sam and Emily nodded, the determination in their eyes matching his as they stepped out. The trio moved toward the house, their footsteps quick but hesitant. James held the key tightly, his knuckles white. Emily lingered, glancing nervously at the windows. It looks so normal, she whispered. Sam placed a hand on her shoulder. We'll handle it together, he reassured her. The house loomed ahead, its secrets waiting. James paused at the door, glancing back at Sam and Emily, who both gave him silent nods. This is it, he said softly. The sound of chirping birds outside felt surreal against the weight of the moment. Taking a deep breath, James slid the key into the lock, bracing himself for what lay inside. James turned the key, the sound echoing in the silence. The door creaked open, revealing the home's pristine interior bathed in sunlight. The familiar sight felt unnerving now. Let's find that entrance, James said, stepping inside. Sam and Emily followed closely, their footsteps quiet as they crossed the threshold into the house. James led them to the pantry, their movements cautious and deliberate. Each creak of the floorboards heightened the tension. "This explains the muddy footprints," Emily whispered, glancing nervously around. Sam nodded, his eyes fixed on the pantry door. The trio gathered in front of it, bracing themselves for what they might find. James grasped the pantry door handle, pausing briefly. He glanced at Sam and Emily, who nodded in encouragement. Slowly, he opened the door. The pantry looked ordinary food neatly arranged on the shelves. For a moment, doubt crept in. "Let's take a closer look," James said, stepping inside to examine the space more carefully. The trio searched the pantry meticulously, finding nothing at first. Then James noticed a faint line on the wall behind a cabinet. "Hold on," he said, his voice steady but alert. He traced the line with his fingers, feeling its edges. With a gentle pull, a hidden panel shifted, revealing a small opening behind it. James crouched, peering into the small opening. "I'll go first," he said, gripping his flashlight. With a deep breath, he ducked inside, crawling through the narrow passage. It widened after a few feet, allowing him to stand. James called back, "It's clear." The hidden space felt eerily quiet as he waited for the others. Sam and Emily joined James in the concealed area, their flashlights revealing a staircase. "This must lead to the basement," James said, pointing to the stairs. The air grew colder as they descended carefully, each step creaking underfoot. A sense of anticipation gripped them, knowing they were about to uncover something significant. At the bottom of the staircase, they discovered a hidden living space, a furnished room with a bed, couch, and small kitchen. Even a shower stood in one corner. "This is unbelievable," Emily whispered. The realization hit them. Someone had been living here, hidden beneath the house, undetected for years. In the corner, an elderly man sat in a wobbly chair watching them. He appeared frail but calm, as if waiting for this moment. James stepped forward. "Ernest Wilhelm?" he asked carefully. The man nodded, a faint smile forming. "You found me," he said, his voice soft but steady. "Well, the jig is up," Ernest said with a raspy laugh. "I knew this day would come." He explained how his family had forced him to sell the house, prioritizing its financial worth over his attachment. "I built this land," he said bitterly, "but they only saw dollar signs when prices rose." Ernest had sealed off the basement before selling, creating a hidden world for himself. He lived beneath the Petersons for years, venturing out only at night. "I'm a loner," he admitted, his hands trembling. But Parkinson's made it harder. His struggle was evident, and the group listened, torn between pity and concern. "I've been dropping things," Ernest confessed. "That's why the kitchen was a mess." The trio felt for him, but they knew he couldn't stay. "It's not safe for you anymore," James said gently. Ernest nodded, understanding. Together, they decided to find him a new place where he could live safely and comfortably. After weeks of searching, they found a peaceful cottage for Ernest near a nursing home for support. Moving was bittersweet, but James, Sam, and Emily were there every step of the way. Over time, Ernest adjusted, finding solace in the sunlight-filled countryside and the warmth of new connections with his visitors. The trio visited Ernest often, bringing meals and sharing stories. Their bond deepened, transforming into a friendship Ernest cherished. "You're my real family," he said, grateful for their care. Meanwhile, Sam and Emily enjoyed their home, now free of secrets, its mysterious past becoming a memory they would always treasure. As Ernest's health declined, James, Sam, and Emily stayed by his side, offering comfort and companionship. "You saved me," Ernest said one day, his voice weak but filled with gratitude. They knew the feeling was mutual. The house, with all its hidden history, had brought them together in the most unexpected and meaningful way.